All right. Good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock, and so we will start today's PAR. I welcome everybody online in the chambers, and we'll open up the meeting. Just starting with apologies, please. I'll note that we have an apology from Councillor McCone, from Deputy Mayor Halale, and also from Mayor Kircher. So that means we still have a quorum for the PAR with Councillor Blackler, with Rebecca, with myself, and with Jim, and so we can proceed with the meeting. So can I ask, please, if somebody moves that we accept the apologies? Moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Blackler. All those in favour? Against? Thank you, that's carried. I'll now just ask if we have any declarations of interest, please. And with none, we'll continue with the meeting. We're just going to have a slight change in plan this morning. We have our special guests here from North Otago Irrigation Company to speak to us. So we will just move agenda item 4.4 along to at the very start now. We'll go through the minutes in a little bit, but I'd like to welcome, please, Andrew Rodwell, the Chief Executive, and Stephen Craig Pearson, the Operations Manager from NOIC. Thank you for coming along today. We at a couple of PARs ago, I and some of the other members were really keen to just have an update from you, as both a representative of North Otago Irrigation and of sort of irrigation in general, with the early repayment of the Observatory Village debt that the council had lent out. Irrigation represents the biggest sort of external debt that we've got on our book now, and so we're really keen to hear from you today, just for 15-20 minutes or so on NOIC, on irrigation in Waitaki in general, and the kind of climate that you're operating in. So with that, I'll hand over, and then we'll just maybe open up to some questions as we go. Just push that red button and leave it on hold, and that way people online will be able to hear.
One there. Okay, you're in business. All right. Well, thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity to come and talk with you. Interestingly, this time we're here actually as Aquis. Aquis is a joint venture that was created by the North Otago Irrigation Company and Lower Waitaki, and it commenced operations on the 1st of July last year. The arrangement means that Aquis has full management responsibility under contract to North Otago Irrigation Company, so which no longer has any staff, and so in our respective capacities, Stephen and I will speak for NOIC, but it's just on for the record, we are employed by Aquis Limited. And Aquis Limited, as I said, is a joint venture established by the Lower Waitaki Irrigation Company and North Otago Irrigation Company. And it also manages the Maraphanua and Kura-Duntroon irrigation companies. So collectively, that represents about 450 farming entities in the Waitaki region, covering an irrigated footprint of about 55,000 hectares, of which North Otago Irrigation Company, NOIC, I'll just call it NOIC for the moment, is 20,000 of that 55,000. Aquis has 18 staff and is governed by a board of 5. NOIC remains a registered company. It owns its assets, it owns and has full responsibility for all the capital program, for R&M, for insurance. It's governed by a board of 6, but as I noted, no staff, and its business operations in every sense are managed by Aquis under contract. The contract is quite prescriptive and sets out the obligations for Aquis. So to that end, while it's NOIC's debt obligations remain with NOIC, the delivery, if you like, and compliance in respect of that debt is managed by Aquis. NOIC was established, as you know, in 2004 in this first stage, designed to irrigate 20,000 hectares. The second stage was commissioned in around 2017, and that's now fully, the scheme is now fully utilised. So it was designed to irrigate 20,000 hectares, one share in the company for each irrigated hectare means that the ultimate goal was to issue 20,000 shares. Those 20,000 shares have now been issued. And to that end, the scheme is technically fully subscribed. Stephen will probably, will go into the implications of that. But the important matter is that we wouldn't expect any further share sales or any further capital input into NOIC. But the fully subscribed status of the company does present a balance sheet which is pretty compelling from a risk perspective and an assurance of income, which again to a lending organisation like the Waitaki Council will provide it a high level of comfort, I would expect. So anyhow, and one of the key, I guess, the key outcomes of this full subscription is that two things. One is that via Aquis and the synergies that we've achieved and the full subscription of shares in NOIC, the water charges for the first time year on year have been able to be maintained flat. In reality, we could have lowered them, such as the advantage of those two factors. But the board has opted not to, which is a matter consistent with our long-term balance sheet management policy. So I thought probably at this point, there are some questions that Paul had identified for us. I'll pass off to Stephen, just to correct Simon. Stephen's our commercial manager. That's all right. He holds that role for Aquis and did hold that role for many years for NOIC.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. So the NOIC scheme is made up of 180 farming entities. So the average shareholding in NOIC is only 105 shares. So the point of this is that your primary source of debt repayment comes from a widely diversified pool of highly successful farmers. So no individual shareholder holds more than 10% of the company, and our largest shareholders hold about 6 or 7%, but they themselves are collections of farms. And the farming base is 75% dairy, 5% arable, and the other 20% is sheep and beef. So there's a wide spread of farming entities that support the primary source of repayment to council. That shareholding base gives the company a very strong collection record. The company has never written off any money owed by a farmer, and currently we've got no arrears at present. And this is very, very normal for us. We have a very strong collection history with all our shareholders. If something does go wrong with an individual farm, the company has a registered encumbrance that ranks ahead of that farm's bank. So if a farm is unable to pay its bank and it's in that small dark situation, the irrigation company is still paid and has always been paid in those situations. The largest variable cost of the company, of NOIC, is interest. And we have an active treasury policy that manages that cost, advised by Bancorp. And throughout the whole of the last interest cycle, the variability in interest rates has not been passed on to farmers. And this is in line with our long-term risk management goals and providing stability and reliability of cost to our shareholding farmers. Similarly, the company charges the farmers the equivalent of fixed rates. So in the last wet season, we had no loss of income. Every cent that was needed to be paid to run a balanced budget and cover all our fixed insurance, preventative maintenance and ongoing reliability costs were funded independent of any climatic variations. The issue with the remaining shares that Andrew talked about was a very important milestone for the company and a further risk reduction. So 80% of the company's costs are fixed, and now there's no overbuild and no existing shareholders are carrying any additional costs for unused infrastructure. So all the infrastructure is now fully subscribed, which directly reduces the company's risk and the ultimate risk on the shareholders. There is no deferred maintenance in the NOIC scheme. And as Andrew mentioned, the company is accelerating its cash build as a buffer in preparation for eventual fixed asset renewals that inevitably come the long-lived infrastructure like this. Where the council sits in the company's debt structure is you provide about 13% of the company's debt, about $13 million. The ASB provides about $69 million, which is about 84% of the company's debt. So where council sits with that is your pari passu, you rank equally. So no lender can prejudice the other. And if the worst was happen, and then if the worst was to happen, you'd both sit at the table equally. Nobody would get paid before you. Your obligations from NOIC are secured. So there is a general security agreement. It secures all present and after acquired property. And ASB holds that as security agent, but both lenders, ASB and council, benefit from it equally. The actual debt level of just over 80 million sits at about $4,000 a share per hectare. And this is quite a moderate level. This is a very sustainable level of debt for an East Coast irrigation scheme. So that's a good place to be. Council and the ASB have both been lenders since 2005. And that's a very positive credential. You've got a major rural lender, there's the primary bank, and both that relationship and that partnership have been in place now for 20 years without changes. NOIC is exceeding its debt servicing obligations, and it's meeting all its covenants with both its lenders very comfortably. There's no issues there. The relationship with the bank is very good, and I believe the relationship with our council as a primary lender and a very supportive long-term partner is very strong. The current debt structure has quite long maturities. Both loans with the council and the ASB pretty much sit side by side, and they mature in around 2030. So we've got another 4.5 years to renew and renegotiate those loans, and we expect that we will, with the resource consent renewal happening prior to that. So that's a summary, ladies and gentlemen, and very open to taking any questions on those points.
Thank you very much. That was a really useful summary and much appreciated. I'd quite like to touch on. You've issued all of the shares. You've kind of got as big as you can get. Things are going along well, and in that sense, I think Aquis is a great. Is a great thing to do because of all of the synergies and the efficiencies that you get out of it. So this next cab off the rank is resource consents and ensuring that you get those. What are the risks that you see around the consenting process that you're just starting to go through?
Sure. Well, there are probably a couple of challenges, I guess, for NOIC. The two challenges are in respect of reconsenting, which is obtaining a new consent for the water take from the Waitaki River. And the second is managing the capital replacement program that Stephen alluded to. So in both cases, I think we're well organised and have a very, very clear plan. On the second matter, we've already touched on that through our balance sheet strengthening program. But the reconsenting of our water take consent is absolutely critical. The consent itself expires in March 2030. The latest that we can lodge an application with Environment Canterbury, who are the issuer of the water take consent, is September 2029. But we are already very much underway with the process. So in the first instance, we've assembled what we call a project control group. The key people in that are professional consultants who are involved in resource planning, who are resource lawyers, resource management lawyers. And there's a group of probably about 4 key experts who are helping us. The second is that we've formed a collaborative program with 4 schemes who are on the same boat, same journey. Ourselves, Marafanua, when I say ourselves, North Otago Irrigation Company, Lower Waitaki Irrigation Company, Marafanua, and MGI across the river. So the 4 schemes are working collaboratively. There's a whole lot of efficiencies in doing that. Cost reduction. The program will cost circa $1 million to get that consent for the 4 schemes. $1 million. It's the regulatory world we live in, and that. But fortunately, by acting in a collaborative fashion as we are, NOIC's share of that is considerable, is only its proportionate amount. But yes, that's what's involved in obtaining water take consents in this modern age. That I would say is our biggest challenge and a significant piece of work. But I would say that we have every expectation that we will receive a water take consent as a result of our application, and that may be any time before 2030. We'll be prepared and choose the timing that best suits us to do this. And it may mean that we are lodging an application considerably ahead of 2029 deadline. The only change we expect will be that we will have a volume cap applied to the consent, but the utilisation of water by North Otago Irrigation Company farmers is such that the volume cap, which will be calculated based on the number of hectares to be irrigated, is an amount of water that we will be able to live with, not just in 9 out of 10 years, which is generally how it's calculated, but in 10 out of 10 years.
And I'm thinking, and I'm assuming you're not the first cab off the rank in terms of irrigation companies that are going through the reconsenting process. Like others that have gone through this process before, what's the strike rate, right? What's the success rate been for that?
Probably the most recent one was actually Cura Duntroon, and so these water take consents historically were issued for 35 years. So you appreciate that they don't come up often, and certainly the 4 schemes that are collaborating from the Waitaki are the first in a long time, certainly since Cura Duntroon. What we're very mindful of is that we need to demonstrate that the effects on the environment, and we need to demonstrate that they're both minimal and manageable. And again, this is why we've created this project management group of experts who in turn, which I'm a part of, which in turn is commissioning a range of experts in all sorts of areas: ecology, hydrology, groundwater quality, and we've got a history and a database of information around water quality. We've already engaged significantly with certain stakeholders, in particular iwi. The initial indications from iwi, particularly from Moraki, are that they're well supportive of our program. So we don't see any impediments, any particular issues to getting our consent, but I can't tell you that there are any precedents in recent years that that either give us high levels of confidence or any particular concerns.
Thank you. And I guess, and you'd be expecting another 30 odd years of consent this time around?
Well, that's my reference to timing. It's under the prior government, the indications and the Natural Built Environment Act, that would have been unlikely because the indications within that act for regional councils were to limit the tenure of resource consents relating to water takes. And that was heavily submitted on. And I personally appeared before the Parliamentary Select Committee to explain a case as to why short duration consents would be problematic, particularly in terms of funding arrangements and capital improvements, which might need financing. So, but anyway, my opinion and a range of others were ignored by that particular government. But the current coalition government has taken a quite different view. So if we do get our timing right as far as an application is concerned, we fully expect to have long duration. Now, whether we can get 35 years or whether it's 25, but we're fully expecting a long duration relative to what it might have been under the NBEA and the prior government's position, which would have been closer to 10.
Oh, $10 million every 10 years. That's sorry, Jim. I just had one more question, which is relative to this, if you don't mind. Stephen, you mentioned before that the lion's share of your revenue is fixed, and so whether it's a wet year or a dry year, it doesn't have a significant impact. I'm just thinking, wearing one of my other hats, if you're going 25, 35 years, this climate change thing that everybody's talking about, that's actually quite real and is forecast to have a significant impact on rainfall patterns in the North Otago kind of district. Have you done any work on the potential impact of climate change on rainfall patterns and therefore the offtake patterns for the scheme and what potential impact that could have on your revenue streams?
We've not done specific work on the impact on climate change and how farmers might use water. But I think it's worth pointing out, though, that each season is very different than the last, and every month is different than every other month, and the variations between them are significant. So we're already in the business of insulating farmers and giving them reliability of production in a highly uncertain and highly variable market. And the infrastructure's been proven to perform reliably in situations of very dry years and very high demand, continuous 24/7, 365, day after day, week after week for months at full demand. And the other thing I've noticed in my time at the company is that I think farmers have adapted extremely well. So when I first got to the company, there were a range of irrigation systems, K-line was in widespread use, those sorts of types of technologies. They're still in play, but farmers have adopted, more efficient uses of on-farm technology. They've adopted, fixed grid and other more variable type ways of applying water. Soil moisture monitoring's gone from just standing at the back door and hanging a guess to very sophisticated farms that have remote monitoring and to limited systems that connect. So I think I can't predict the future. It's uncertain. It's a risk that's coming from us from a variety of points. Insurance is another one. Our lenders are also focusing on it, the ASB. But I think as a group, my sense is that it's not a precipitous or easily quantifiable risk.
Thank you. Jim, you had a question?
Yeah, look, a couple of questions. One of them possibly to Roger or to Alex, but specifically just to clarify something that I'm pretty sure I think I've understood, but Aqueous is just a management company, is that right? It just simply, essentially, you've exported the management functions of the old company into a new entity.
Old companies, plural.
Yes. Plural, yes. Now, the question I have with regard to the water consent, I'm just wondering the extent to which we're involved in this application and or whether we see any benefit in action. I mean, I'm thinking about the fact that we've got all of our potable water for Oamaru and all the way down to Hamden and Mairaki comes from the same river. And theoretically, the impact of one set of consents, the irrigation consents, could impact the other. So I'm just wondering whether we're in any way associated with or have become a party to or an interested party to this application, and or whether we're looking at timing out any renewals we might need to coincide with it to make sure that everything's dealt with as a package.
So I'll start and others can fill in, but yeah, we are an interested party and it's something that we've been thinking about through the Oamaru water strategy. And we've been discussing that with, so the waters specialists have been discussing that with Andrew and team and where that fits in, but also, as a shareholder in the Lower Waitaki scheme, we have a direct interest in that as a result of, the Oamaru's water supply coming through that. So, as lender, as shareholder, and as part of our Oamaru water strategy, yes, we are interested and engaged in this process.
Just supplementary, that the Lower Waitaki scheme is part of your consent renewal application, the $1 million.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Tim.
Thank you. Thanks for the update. It's been really helpful just to listen into where things are at and how things have changed with the implementation of AQUIS. I just you mentioned the balance sheet policy to accumulate funds for asset renewals, and and you talked about the two challenges of the consent renewal and the capital replacement program moving forward. I just wondered if you could touch on whether or not that capital replacement program poses any issues or tensions around the current schedule for principal repayments, moving forward through 2030. And the second question I had was in and around the approach to consent renewal with the RMA reform in play and the changes anticipated in that space. How do you see all that playing out in terms of the take that you're seeking to achieve?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of your first question, we will levy the farmers through water charges sufficient to achieve both outcomes, to meet all of our P&I responsibilities in terms of debt servicing, and also to achieve a position with our balance sheet that as and when we need to fund capital improvements, we have the capacity to do that. This is a conversation we've had with ASB as well, and so they're fully aware of that strategy. So in terms of the second, does that answer your question on the first? Yeah.
Just following up on that though, right? I mean, you can only levy to a certain point, right? So there's got to be a pain point for the farmer where they go, actually, hang on a minute, if you levy, like, how far have you done any analysis on what that pain point is and how far away you are from it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the starting point is where do NOIC water charges sit relative to the median within the irrigation sector, and they're one of the advantages that we have as a non-competitive sector, if you like, is that the irrigation schemes, which are predominantly around Canterbury and Otago, have an opportunity to meet together, and we do so on a quarterly basis. Well, the CEs do, so do the operations managers and the environmental managers separately. And we discuss matters of common interest, and in and amongst all of that is, farmers' capacity to sustain certain water charges. So I know where the range sits, and I know what the bottom of the range is, and it's one of our local irrigation companies, and I know where the top of the range sits, and that's one of the mid-Canterbury schemes. And that range is, but NOIC sits smack in the median. So, but the difference for NOIC is that its level of reliability of supply of water and the standard of service provided because of the nature of the infrastructure that supports the farming community and North Otago Irrigation Company means that it is well ahead, in my view, of any other scheme. So the water charges are at the median, the reliability and quality of service are at the upper end. So I think the Noik farming shareholders have got plenty of capacity if we needed it, but we're not intending to stretch them. That's not the purpose.
Thank you. Sorry, and just the second question that you had, Tim, was around the RMA.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, so, sorry, Tim, would you say that again?
Oh, yeah, it was just, there's a lot of reform happening in the RMA space, and I just, presumably that's going to result in some changes around possibly the way water's allocated. So I just wondered what your views were on that and how that kind of interrelates with leading up to 2029.
Yeah. Well, we're confident that no, firstly, the water out of the Waitaki River is allocated under the Waitaki Allocation Plan, WCWARP, and it's not over allocated as a water body, but the rules about how it's to be allocated are very clear in that plan. So for Noik in particular, the take from the river is 8 cumecs as an instantaneous rate of take. There is no expectation that rate of take, being reasonably small relative to irrigating 20,000 hectares, is under any threat at all. But the RMA changes to some degree are liberalising some of the rules and tightening up on other rules. So we're navigating our way through all of that. The key is to demonstrate that you are using the water that is allocated to you efficiently and for the purpose that it's allocated, and that you're having minimal to no environmental impact. Now, the latter one is pretty much impossible. The mere existence and presence of human beings creates environmental problems, whether it's urban or rural, and certainly farming does. But there is an understanding that provided you can run an irrigated farming system within the rules, then you will get the water in order to use it for irrigation purposes and food and fibre production. So while we're having to navigate our way through some of these new arrangements, and we're waiting on the full version of the RMA, of course, at the moment anyway, we're not seeing it as any point of particular concern to us. For Noik, Lower Waitaki, just as an aside, and we're not here to talk about them, but Lower Waitaki as an irrigation company has got a very clear program of upgrade ahead of it, and it understands what that looks like. And the reason that it's having to make those upgrades is to be more efficient with the water that it's allocated, because historically it's not been. So it will need to spend money, including a section of the network which is applicable to the Waitaki District Council and its supply of water, and it will do that. And we understand what the efficiency gains will be, and the experts advise us that those efficiency gains will be satisfactory as far as the regional council is concerned.
Sorry, just a supplementary to that. In the case of Kuria Duntroon, I guess the efficiency gains saw an expansion of the irrigation program, with the same sort of allocation. This is way back in time, I guess, but will we see a similar outcome with respect to Lower Waitaki, or would it be more a return of allocation back to the system?
Lower Waitaki doesn't currently, as Noik doesn't either, have a volume cap attached to its allocation. So, but its rate of take is set at 19 cumecs. We're expecting that it'll probably be issued with a lesser instantaneous rate of take, which is fine, because the efficiency gains from improving the physical structure of the network will mean that lesser rate of take and the volume cap attached to that will still enable all of the requirements to be met. The requirements being the irrigated farmers' requirements, the council's requirements in terms of water supply for town use, and the commercial users' requirements, the alliances and road metals, etc. So these all form individual buckets, and I think to Councillor Hopkins' point earlier, one of those buckets for Lower Waitaki is council supply. So that will be each of those buckets will be applied for as part of the collective application for water for Lower Waitaki, and each one of those buckets we expect to be given in exactly the amounts that we require. So the town supply will be sufficient to meet its current and future predicted use.
Thank you. And look, thank you very much both. I'm conscious of time and I don't want to take up too much of yours. And we've got a bit of agenda to get through as well. So thank you very much. That was really, really useful. And I know I certainly and the others appreciated you coming in, and all the best with the consenting process over the next while. Thank you. All right. So with that, we'll return back to the original agenda, and I'll just move now to agenda item 3 and 3.1 being confirmation of the previous minutes. And I'll open the floor up for any discussion or questions on the previous minutes. Councillor Hopkins. Excellent. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ryan. Thank you. All those in favour? Yes. And that's carried. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to agenda item 4, the memorandum reports, and we'll move to agenda item 4.1, the financial summary. And I'll invite Paul and Amanda to talk to this.
So this is a similar story to what we've talked about probably for the last 6 months. The financial result is looking at a $5.9 million deficit behind budget surplus of about $1 million was predicted at 31 May. So this is the same reasons that I've spoken about before. Revenue is behind due to timing of grants, largely for the event centre. We're hoping that that's going to right itself over the coming months as the trust has now agreed to contribute 100% of their share at the time. Finance revenues behind because of the early repayment of Observatory Village's loan. And then offsetting that expenditure is also higher. There's the depreciation variance that we've known about all year because of the significant revaluation movement at 30 June 24. Personnel costs slightly over budget, which we've spoken about earlier, and Project Reclaim had some timing variances in there. We've publicly announced now that we're going to receive the extra funding from the government in terms of Project Reclaim. So we've accrued that into this financial year, which will help that deficit. It'll write the revenue and expenditure being recognised in the 25 year correctly. So that's going to go a long way to help our deficit position at 30 June, but I still expect a deficit. In terms of the balance sheet, similar reasons for the variances there. The early repayment from Observatory Village has meant the loans and receivables are lower. That's offset in borrowings because we use that to repay debt. Also, we deferred circa 20 million of CapEx from the that was budgeted to complete in the 25 financial year, deferred that to later years. And so that has reduced our additions and also borrowings. And there's a table there that outlines the variances within capital expenditure by departments. Yeah, similar sort of stories as previously. It's about 10 million behind budget. It's spread across all departments. There's the timing variances of Forester and Event Centre, and then some roading and waters projects behind as well.
Thank you. So I guess look, for me, the one question that I had early on was if I go to page 10 under the income and expenditure line, and we talk specifically in here about donations received for the events centre. And then there's noted there that there is they hope to have another 2 million available by the end of June. So I'm noting that that's like 7 days away. How's that looking?
I haven't heard from the trust lately, but they were expecting to hear before the end of the financial year, 30 June. So yeah, I can't publicly say what they've applied for funding for $2 million, and they expect to have confirmation before the end of June.
And the implications if they don't?
They will have to seek funding from other sources, apply for other funding, or will need extra public fundraising.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, just a couple of questions. The first one, I did notice on the Chief Executive's report to Council, which meeting starting at 11 this morning, there's a reference to the deficit being 7.9 million to June, I think April 30. And your report says the deficit's 5,941. I'm just, so can you explain, I mean, obviously we're looking at different periods, is that right? So just for my satisfaction, what's the end date for the period that we're looking at here?
This is 31 May, so it's moved a month further along than the Chief Executive's report.
Well, eliminating 2 million of deficit in a month is a pretty good effort. Is there how have we done that? What miracle have you wrought?
Yeah, so the main variance is in revenue, and it's largely to do with the grants and funding received for the Sports and Event Centre. So up until a couple of months ago, they were paying 50% of the invoices to us and holding on to other portion of the cash, and now they've agreed to provide the cash to us as they receive it.
Just a couple of other things very quickly. A ratepayer has just asked me about the bullet point at the bottom of the page, and page 10, and given the sort of negativity around Project Reclaim in some circles and some of the correspondence to the Oamaru Mail and so on, the question is, how can costs be 1.8 million over budget simply because of timing variances between 22 and 24 and 25 financial year budgets? Are you able to explain that, please?
Yeah, so when we set the budgets, we had our best guess at the time what was going to be incurred in the 24 financial year and what was going to be incurred in 25. But then in reality, we actually spent less in 24 and more in 25. So it's the same overall, but yeah, it's just the differences to budget.
Thank you. You had one more, Jim?
Yeah. Yes, just finally, looking at the page 12, I'm just curious to know why, basically the one question there is that very substantial difference between the budgeted amount for the contractors for economic development and the actual amount spent. 986 was budget and 387 was spent. And also the consultants and valuers thing has jumped $500,000 over budget. Was there any particular thing that caused that not inconsiderable increase?
I have to get back to you on both of those. I can't recall offhand exactly what was budgeted in economic development. Does anyone else? So I have to get back to you on that one. And also consultants, that includes legal fees and valuations as well. So there's probably a whole raft of increased costs across various departments in that area.
Yeah, I had the same two questions, Jim, so it would be good if we could come back on that at some point. Sorry, Paul, were you going to push the button?
Yeah, I think in the consultant space, the most significant variance there is in relation to the district plan process. You know, that is quite different from when we set the budget. You know, if we set it early on in the process, that has required further expertise and engagement with consultants to pursue that. The other major area is also in the sort of the regulatory space in terms of engaging third parties to both primarily assist with the resource consent processing to make sure that we meet sort of community expectations in terms of timing, and that cost is recovered through the consenting fees.
Okay.
And in relation to economic development, you know, there were a number of projects in there that haven't proceeded as quickly as planned. They're ones mainly attached to the better off funding process, so sort of has the dual effect of we've done less work in that space, but we've also had less grant income to fund the work that has been. So sort of an offsetting piece in there.
But there is the potential that those will need to happen in the next financial year. And so it would be good to get a little bit of a breakdown of that for the next time. Sorry, Rebecca, you had a question? Oh, sorry.
Oh, you go.
I guess just because we keep having conversations about transformation efficiencies and offsetting personnel costs, I just noted, fresh my memory looking through the minutes of the previous meeting, that we had asked for the personnel report commissioned by Maven to be presented, or a summary to be presented by the transformation team at this meeting. So just wondering if we're able to get that at some stage.
Yeah, I had the same question, but Alex, you talk to that.
That's in your council agenda as part of the chief executive's update report. So an appendix there, summarises the Maven work assessing our reduction in employee numbers and costs.
Excellent, thank you. Tim.
Thank you. Trying to relate the commentary to the P&L statement there. Mentions a 81K overspend in employee costs, but we've still got the line item there that around backfill for staff vacancies. So as I asked in the previous session, if we could please, treat those two as joined up, because the reality is the overspend is circa 230 or 240K. And just to clarify, the budget line item for employee cost is 17.5 mil for the 25 year up to May. We talked about through the long-term plan process that in the past we haven't accounted for employee expenses associated with capital work. So in terms of that budget number, that would be adopting the old approach, would it not?
This figure is after capitalising employee costs. So the budget and actual, we're comparing apples with apples here, and the 30 June result is 18 point something. So yeah, that's after the employee costs that have been, like staff time that has built an asset, has been put to the balance sheet and capitalised, taken off expenditure here.
Even in that budget figure.
Yeah, so that we're comparing the same things.
Okay, thank you. And at the previous session, we talked about getting a bit of a breakdown on the capital and the capital workspace, a bit of a breakdown of the wages allocated in the various areas. I was just wondering where that piece of work's at.
Yeah, so that's something we're going to do at year end, at 30 June. We'll have a good hard look at the full year's result by department, and break it down by particular area or asset that it's been capitalised to.
Sorry, just one more if that's okay. Just regarding the other expenses, I know it makes up nearly 13% of the total spend, and I think one of the others in the group has asked about this in the past too. It'd be interesting just to drill into that space if there's a top 5 or something in that bucket, just to understand what goes in there.
Yep, that's something that we could probably, be good to do at 30 June as well. We can look by type of cost or by department and break it down a bit more detail.
I think that would be great to see, and I reinforce your comment around the capex staff costs as well. We really want to see that at the year end also. Jeremy, you had a question.
Just on the depreciation, is that just a one-time catch-up that from the reevaluation that won't affect the long-term plan budgets? It won't continue to go?
We've had to tweak our opening balance for the long-term plan because of that, and then try to guesstimate what our depreciation should be over the long-term plan. So we have booked what our assets and our depreciation levels are right now versus and then added on what we think the valuations are going to be at 30 June 25, but it's kind of anyone's guess. So it'll depend on what our valuations come back like in the next month, because that will be a new starting point for the long-term plan. But we have increased the depreciation expense based on reality from last year's revaluation. So
We must have a
hopefully
reasonable
right
idea of what the
amount.
valuations will be.
Yeah, well, so we base all councils when they prepare their long-term plan use financial indices from Burrell. So we get given those the nationally recognised indices. Everyone's using the same rates, but it's still hard to guess.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, look, one very quick final question, if I can. Are you able to explain just under capex on page 12 that there was a budgeted expenditure by property of 8585, but the actual was just 2918. I'm just wondering what didn't get done to account for that discrepancy.
That's the delay in the Forester Gallery expansion.
Okay. Thank you. Look, if there's no further questions, could I ask please that somebody move that we receive the copy of the report? Moved by Tim, seconded by Jim. Thank you very much. All those in favour? Against, and that's carried. So thanks, Amanda. Some good requests. We look forward to some of the 30 June information coming back to us again. So thank you very much. We'll now move on to agenda item 4.2. This is a new agenda item that we've got in for this month, and I'll invite Josh and Caitlin to come and speak to this. So that is page 14 of your agenda of your meeting. Josh, over to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having Caitlin and I along this morning. The intention of the report, as submitted to the Performance Audit and Risk Committee, is to update the committee on our compliance as it relates to health and hygiene in the infrastructure area. When we're talking about health and hygiene, we're talking about water, wastewater, stormwater and solid waste compliance matters. The infrastructure unit also operates and maintains our roading network and our parks and reserves network. We're not talking about those here. We're just talking about health and hygiene. Much of the information in this report may seem relatively new to many of you. I know it certainly felt that way when I was doing a little bit of a stock take on our compliance when I first took over the role. Our annual report last year had indicated that 13 out of 14 of our water supplies were non-compliant. According to this report, we're at 11 of 14 this year, so slight improvement, although that may change in the coming quarters as those get reported. With the change in our organisational design, there's now a greater focus on some of the compliance matters with Caitlin heading up the compliance team. Caitlin's put together the majority of this report, which should provide quite a lot of detail for all of you on where we're failing in terms of compliance. And it's certainly going to be a strong component moving forward in terms of us trying to reach compliance. Within the report, you'll see that the water failings in particular, there's a number of factors involved. In some cases, it's sampling related. In other cases, it's data set related, where we've got missing data, so we can't report. on a moment in time on some water supplies. And in other cases, it's due to changing standards. A number of the supplies that we have already upgraded now need to be re-upgraded, given the changes to standards in 2022, November of 2022. And we're still catching up on a few supplies that haven't yet been upgraded. There's also a number of non-compliance matters within the wastewater space, which the governance team have previously had a briefing on. I just wanted to have the report in as much detail as possible prior to making some informed decisions on long-term plan budgets. I think it's important for council to understand what its investment's moving towards.
Thank you, Josh and Caitlin. I guess from my read of it, the first thing I notice is that there is an awful lot of orange and some frightening red squares in there. One of the ones that was of greatest concern to me, if I was reading through it, was the Oamaru wastewater non-compliance, which we've had an abatement notice for. And I understand when we get abatement notices, if we don't start to comply with things, that means there can be some legal issues that start to crop up pretty quickly. The standout for me was the Oamaru one, where I read down there on page 18 on the first paragraph at the bottom, ORC has recently agreed to extend the compliance date generously to 1 July 2025. By my math, that's 8 days away. How are we looking?
Short answer, we won't be compliant by the 1st of July. The abatement notice has been in place for quite a few years, with quite a few different activities occurring at the Oamaru wastewater plant to try to reach compliance. We've spent millions of dollars desludging the ponds. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars adding additional aeration into the ponds. There were, and Caitlin can correct me if I'm quoting this incorrectly, there were 3 parameters that were non-compliant. We're down now to 1 parameter that is non-compliant, so we've gained a lot of traction. The last option that we probably have, other than dealing with some of our trade waste issues at source in a timely manner, is to put some additional filtration at the outlet of the plant, which we're investigating some options for that at the moment. They're quite costly, so we're trying to refine it to get something that's definitely going to work for the amount of money that we're going to have to spend. But we have been working with OIC throughout the duration of the non-compliance. What they want from us is a firm plan of how we're going to reach compliance, which we're aiming to give them within 8 days.
Okay, so thank you for bringing this to us. We spoke about it last month and through the month, and I was very keen, given the risk associated with this, that the PAR members were made aware of it as well. Caitlin, for you and Josh, what's the standout biggest single concern in this report? What do you think the greatest risk is to the council in the report that you've provided us with today?
For me, it would be the Oamaru wastewater treatment plant non-compliance.
And so what does that mean, right? You've said there's an abatement notice that's been issued for years. We're not going to meet what we need to meet in 8 days' time. We're investigating some things. So what do they do? Extend it out? Like, what's the risk? Is it a health and safety risk, or a regulatory risk, or a legal risk?
The risk would be that if we didn't get ahead of that date and request another extension, is likely the best course of action at this point, that they would turn to an infringement fine. But ORC has indicated to us that for our last remaining non-compliant parameter, if it is continuing to trend downwards back towards compliant, they will definitely consider an extension to allow time for it to continue to drop. We've been waiting on our May sample results to be able to get a good picture of whether that's happening, and sadly the courier lost our sample. So, and these are just the factors we're up against in terms of compliance. A lost sample, all these sorts of things can just flip it in the space of a day. So we're retaking that sample, but our best course of action at the moment, I think, would be to apply for an extension to give us further time to see how that perimeter is going. It's actually very close to compliant. If it can't get that final stretch to compliance, then we are talking further upgrades. So our case to ORC would need to be, can we have a longer extension to allow us to install some form of new infrastructure that could bring it into compliance? And Josh's team has been looking at filtration and something that we could add to the site that hopefully is not too expensive and could factor into the bigger picture for this consent, because its expiry is within the next 10 years and large upgrades will be needed before we get a new consent. So it's a fine balance of not doing too much when the site is going to need an overhaul in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I mean, all of this sounds like money and quite a lot of money. And I'm wondering, how much of that is already built into the budgets and the long-term plans versus sort of more of the intermediary remediation that may not be budgeted for.
There is budget within the long-term plan for the necessary upgrades to be able to achieve compliance. We are hoping that through the steps that we've already taken, we'll be able to get that final parameter down within limits, and then we won't actually need to expend that money. But we have allowed a budget for it in case we do need to.
Thank you. So it sounds like you've got the money, you're working on the solutions. It's more of a timing issue than anything else.
Yes, I'd say that would be appropriate. Yes. Yeah. There's just a number of different possible solutions for Waimaru wastewater treatment plant. And it's trying to work out which solution is going to best meet the requirements that we have to meet at the most cost-effective manner.
And do you feel like you've got the resource or the expertise that you need to be able to identify those remediations?
Yes, we do. I suppose the issue that I'd draw your attention to through the report is the number of problems that we have to deal with. For us, it really is a matter of prioritization. We don't have the resource to be able to deal with all of these problems at once. The water team didn't previously either, which is why we still have some non-compliances out there. What we're trying to do is triage our efforts, so to speak, to deal with what we perceive as the highest risk items before we then are able to work through and deal with the lower risk items.
And the new structure that's been created through the transformation program provides you with the support that you need to be able to prioritise?
To be able to prioritise, yes. Yep, absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, Jim.
Thank you. Look, I guess to me, this report is A, very helpful, and B, a bit of a wake-up call. When you look at some of the submissions we've received on the Three Waters proposal, a number of people have been asserting that, oh, we're in great shape and we've done wonderful things and all is well in our neck of the woods and everyone else has got problems. But this would suggest that it's not the case. I mean, basically what you're saying is that 11 of the 14 schemes, admittedly, the predominant problems exist predominantly in the smaller ones, but 11 of the 14 are non-compliant. However, the question I want to ask in relation to that is whether the label of non-compliance is applied permanently or on an annual basis, irrespective of whether or not the actual non-compliance is also of 12 months duration. I'll give you an example of why I'm asking this. Page 16, there's a reference to Lower Waitaki, which is non-compliant because A, the UV treatment in place does not equal or exceed the allocated class 3 determination. There were also 6 days in October 2024 where the UV dose at some point during the day was less than the minimum requirement. So does the scheme end up being categorised as non-compliant for the whole year because of a 6-day breach?
Yes, correct, it does. So if there is any breach of the requirements within a 12-month period, that scheme is non-compliant for the 12-month period. That is a shift that is looking to occur from Taumata ROI, particularly with regards to data gaps and testing results, where they'll be looking at a percentage compliance rather than necessarily the binary compliant or non-compliant. Which will be positive for us because one errant sample can mean that we're completely non-compliant for the year. That'll be a situation that we'll have to deal with shortly, where we had an E. coli positive sample come through from Hamden, the Oamaru scheme, which will render the Oamaru scheme non-compliant for this 12-month period. However, that was shown to be a sampling area. Repeat samples all showed that there was no issues within the supply itself.
So is it because I note on the top of page 15, it talks about if you're non-compliant for a single quarter, you're non-compliant for the whole 12 months. Is it rolling quarters, or is it calendar year, or is it how does it work?
For water, I think it's financial. I think it's based on 1 July to 30 June. It does line up because we report similar things in our annual report. The performance measures are basically exactly what's here. So I believe it's 1 July to 30 June. But yes, once you have a failure.
Yeah, I thought it might be you just take the last 4 quarters, and so once you're non-compliant, one had dropped off.
No, we do have reporting to Taumata ROI at a specific time of the year, and yeah, they base their report off.
Right, so new financial year potentially clean slate. Tim, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. Well, just to begin with, I'd say, I guess at face value, these reports look concerning the way they're presented, but I'd probably take a slightly counter view to Councillor Hopkins in that, a good majority of the underlying information and behind these clearly relate to, partly an approach that we adopted as council, which was to further investigate the acceptable solutions pathway, which is, as we can see with the underlying reporting, that is what we're currently working towards. And Taumata ROI are aware of what we're doing in that space. So I think it's fair to say, is it not, that we've been working closely with them on that?
Yes, that is the case. For those suppliers that haven't yet had any upgrades at all, we are looking at the acceptable solutions, which are currently being revised in terms of standard by Taumata ROI. There are still a number of other suppliers that will require further upgrades though, which again does come at a cost.
So, I guess for me, the two standout ones are the Kurau and Oda Matata and the Oamaru wastewater, as we've discussed, which, as you've rightly pointed out, that's where the focus needs to be and obviously is at present. So, I just had 2 questions. The first question was, you made reference to some changes around percentage compliance rather than compliant or non-compliant. So do we have kind of any expectations of where that might land? And is there going to be some sort of variation, from a metro through to provincial type scheme, or would it be just a hard line compliance no matter where we are? And the second question was, you mentioned about the trade waste issue, and we've been well briefed on this prior to this as council, but where's the priority being placed on that program of work? And a few months down the track, how do we see that as playing an integral part and part of that solution? And if there's further support needed from governance on that matter, where do we need to focus our attention there to help assist?
So a couple of questions there. I'll deal with the first one first. The last one first, trade waste. There hasn't been a lot of progress yet to date. We have been in contact with our largest contributor of trade waste. They have renewed their permit with us, and they're working with some external agencies to try to get some support to resolve some of their trade waste concerns and bring it back within the discharge permit compliance requirements that we've issued to them. I'll be looking to do another short-term extension of that, so they have some time to be able to do what they need to do to to achieve compliance. The focus so far has been on those who we already have a discharge permit with, as opposed to those who don't currently have a discharge permit. Dealing with trade waste though is quite a resource intensive activity. So we are trying to, as I said, prioritise work effort where we can to get the to deal with the greatest risk at the best possible time. If we're able to achieve compliance for the Waimaru wastewater plant, it's unlikely that trade waste will then be our highest priority. We'll then try to get compliance on a number of other matters before we then put some effort towards trade waste prior to the significant upgrade that's going to be required at the end of resource consent expiry. We want to try to make sure that we deal with that issue before we have to upgrade a plant, because we don't want to upgrade a plant that and spend additional millions of dollars when we don't have to, when we can deal with it at source. In regards to your other question on when Taumata ROI might be shifting to a non-binary type of reporting regime, I don't have further detail on that at this stage. I'm not sure when it will be coming out or in what manner they'll be looking at it. Taumata ROI are looking at shifting a number of standards at the moment. We've got wastewater discharge standards out for draft. We've got the acceptable solutions being worked on at the moment. And then there's the change in reporting requirements. So not
All
sure.
right, hang on.
Could I just have one supplementary? Is it,
Last one.
Just on the trade waste. So is it an operational matter that's being well resourced, or is it an additional project that's required to be brought forward as part of the LTP?
It'll be an operational matter as opposed to an additional trade waste project that needs to be raised through the long-term plan.
Rebecca, did you have a question?
Just when we're talking about wastewater non-compliance, you mentioned fines as a possible step. Like, what sort of fines are we looking at? If that, it sounds like obviously that might be the case, but
we received a fine for Palmerston and it was only $750. So I would imagine it would be in the realm of that.
I would draw everyone's attention to the fine that QLDC have just had, $240,000. So it really depends on the scale of the non-compliance.
Yeah, that's a lot more than 750.
It's a lot more than 750.
Roger.
I think naturally our effort is to avoid any fines. I don't think we should be trying to predict what ORC may or may not get awarded if they decide to take action. What I do want to draw attention to is the fact that we are working significantly on the relationship with ORC, and we meet regularly with their officers at my level and officer level to maintain that relationship whilst we work on these matters.
Thank you. Jim.
Yeah, look, very quickly, are you able to explain what the health and safety concerns are that have made it impossible to determine the level of compliance with consent, discharge, quality parameter limits in Duntroon? And do we have a time frame for the 4 resource consents apparently that ORC said we need for the Ardgowan Dam?
I believe the health and safety concerns for Duntroon are we can't even access the points that we're supposed to take samples from. It's in private property. And yeah, having seen the land recently, it's very sloped and overgrown, and yeah, it's very difficult to access. But as part of the new consent that we have to apply for, we will be requesting conditions that we can actually meet in terms of monitoring. Yes, this one, Duntroon was one where it used to be a permitted activity, and then out of the blue, ECAN changed their land and water plan, and we had to get a consent that we'd never had to have before. So
We'll hopefully be able to rectify that in the reconsenting process.
in the new consent process, yeah.
Sorry, Jim, was there a second part to your question?
Well, there was also a reference to the fact that I think I'll just give you the page. It's page 17. Application for 4 new consents is required by the ORC for the Ardgowan Dam. And I was just curious to know whether they had imposed a time frame for that application from us to them.
They recently contacted us and asked us why we hadn't submitted them yet. So I take that as soon as possible. But there is a very long list of consent variations and new consents to be applied for, especially to bring some of these sites back into compliance. And unfortunately, I did have to advise them that we will be prioritising based on non-compliances, and so they will come with time and good time.
Excellent. All right, thank you. No further questions? Excellent, thank you. Moved by councillor Hopkins, seconded by councillor Blackler. All those in favour? Against? Thank you, that's carried. And thank you, Caitlin and Josh, for bringing that along. It's really good to get some oversight of that. So thank you very much. We'll now move on to agenda item 4.3, which is our first Waitaki Districts Council greenhouse gas emissions inventory report. And Victoria, once you've found your name tag. That's all right, we know who you are. So thank you very much. We'll open the floor up for you and Joe.
Good morning, everyone. So really pleased to present Council's first ISO compliant greenhouse gas inventory report with the baseline year of 2022 to 23. So I guess just a few things I wanted to highlight through here is it's really this is like a baseline for us to start with, and it captures the footprint, the carbon footprint of all councils. So that includes obviously things we do ourselves, but also what we contract out to other people, and they deliver services on our behalf for council's benefit. But the top three emission sources, carrying on from the wastewater theme of the last discussion, is wastewater treatment at number 1, electricity consumption number 2, and waste to landfill number 3. So I guess there are a couple of risks identified in the report, which was verified by Toitu. Obviously, data quality is really important for these types of assessments, and generally the data was seen to be pretty good, apart from the wastewater emissions, which were a little bit harder to verify. So there's a bit of a disclaimer in that around that, for a few reasons, which I'll just highlight quickly in a minute. I just wanted to clarify that there is a slight error in my report to you around the carbon liability. So that I think there's a dollar figure attributed in the summary report, which actually should have been the it should be in the carbon dioxide, tons of carbon dioxide emitted. So that's a little bit misleading.
Yeah,
there.
so if you look on the bottom of page 22, Victoria and I went through this yesterday, you'll see there's it says under the risk at the very last bullet point, it talks about a $23.2 million contingent liability. That contingent liability is actually the liability, the 23,000 tonnes liability associated with our forestry assets. So we've got some forestry. With the forestry, we got granted some NZUs, some credit units. If that forest burnt down, or if we chopped it down, or if something terrible happened to it and we didn't replace it, then we'd be liable for those units. So rather than that being $23.2 million, it's actually about $1.4 million based on carbon credit prices as at now.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, so I guess from here, there are some improvements suggested in terms of data collection, and committing to regular emissions reporting. Now we've got the baseline in place. It's a really good starting point. Some really good, clear direction from council would be great, in terms of a policy to help some of these steps moving forwards. We could decide to opt to have some emission reduction targets in place, and start with the easy winners first. For For example, looking at our fleet of vehicles, for example, things, something, there's a little bits and pieces all add up. We have got a biannual budget at the moment in the LTP for this report. Best practice is actually annually. But we've got some money committed to doing this biannually. Happy to take any questions on this.
Thanks. Look, thanks a lot, Victoria, and thank you for all the work associated with this. I know it's from other roles that I have. It's a big job pulling this report together, and it's great to have that kind of first footprint of where we are. So wonderful that we've got a footprint. Question is, where to from here, and what do we do with that? You know, ideally, the next time that we generate this report, it would be wonderful to see our footprint go down, because that's what we're sort of, you know, committing to as a community and as a country, and as part of our international commitments. We don't want to be increasing our environmental footprint. The tricky thing with what comes out of this report is 50% of the emissions that we create directly through our treatment of come through our treatment of wastewater, and that's a really hard one to try and reduce or change. So, you know, we could switch the whole vehicle fleet out to electric from petrol or diesel, and that will have an impact on a relatively small component of our footprint. We should still be trying to do it, but we've got this lion's share of footprint that comes through activities that lots of our peer councils also have happening. How do we, and we talked about this yesterday, and then electricity is another big one, and through the way that we run our procurement process, we can put weightings on, you know, our providers that have a better environmental footprint and take that into account. And so some things like that we can do at almost a negligible or no cost to us that can help us reduce our footprint. But how do we keep an eye on the wastewater bit?
You know, I think there's a great opportunity here for education, even with our own staff and across council around this, just increasing the awareness around it, and sort of thinking about, you know, what can we do better? You know, talking to our wastewater treatment, our specialists in that area, to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Tim.
Thank you. I just had a question. How will this assessment feed into some of the considerations that are put forward for the program of work around our waste, the Waitaki waste management piece, and where all that ultimately lands? And, you know, is there a resource there to be captured that may help to achieve some results in this space?
Not sure I have the answers to that, Councillor. Is that something you could help me with, Roger, or?
I think so. I mean, as a council, we're still unclear as to where we're really going with our waste management. The option to proceed with curbside collections was not taken at the time. That would have a significant impact on some of these figures. The direction of travel that we're taking is that we come back with the new council to establish their appetite for further work on that. At the moment, we don't have an officer in the waste space due to staff movements, but it's something that we need to consider, something that council need to assess, and certainly something that the new council will need to consider as to their long-term strategic vision for carbon footprint, emissions management, etc. That's really as far as I can go at the moment.
Thank you. And just to clarify, if we brought waste in, because currently waste wouldn't be included, then presumably there's a line item there with waste, but is that in relation to our coastal remediation, or doesn't it include an estimate of our district's waste output?
So are you saying the big piece of work that we've just done around Project Reclaim, that created a significant amount of landfill in effect? Are you asking if
that's my question.
Has that increased our footprint for now, and will it go down again?
That's what I'm trying to understand. Is it related to Project Reclaim, or is it our district's waste footprint?
Sorry, this in regard to the report. This is actually 22-23, so it's
So just a
wanna
district
go over
footprint.
baseline. So
So it would just be council only waste,
at
not
that
the
time,
town, not
correct.
the township itself.
Yeah, and we also through Reclaim Remember, we got that ETS rebate back because we were able to successfully show that any emissions associated with the reclaim shift had already been gone and done, and so there were no additional emissions associated with that because it was so old.
And so if we brought waste in within council, would that form part of our footprint, or is that unrelated to what this assessment?
Roger?
As our operations change, whether it's waste management, whether it's, event centre, our waste footprint our carbon footprint changes. So in subsequent audits, they would look at our business operation and say, well, we now need to assess that. So undoubtedly, if waste comes in-house, then this will change the report.
Yeah. So I think what we've got here is we've got a really good foundation and a really good baseline for us to be able to measure ourselves against on a go forward basis, appreciating and understanding that over time our footprint will change as our operations change. So rather than for me, rather than focusing on the overall footprint, I think it's really important for us to be able to focus on the individual bits and pieces and say through changes and processes, we've managed to reduce the footprint associated with wastewater to X or with electricity to Y, etc. Councillor Percival, I saw your hand go up for a minute there. Come on in.
Victoria, you've done an amazing job with this, but I'm not really a believer in all this stuff. So, but
hang on a minute. What are you not a believer in? This
This
is just about our footprint, not about climate change or not about anything else.
I'm just going to make a comment here that on page 35 of the agenda, there's a remark that rainfall was to increase by 20-25%, and in the same page it says that drought potential is likely to increase. Well, I find that just sums up the whole thing to me. I feel very sorry for Roger, who's got the total responsibility for emissions. Good luck.
So I'm just going to address that for a second. The piece around climate change impacts is not something that anybody from within this council's done. It's an independent report that fed into this council. You can have increased rainfall, but drought conditions just through the way that things shift about. You can have a really, really wet winter and a ridiculously dry summer, and you as a farmer know that through your own operations. The second piece is that none of this report is about climate change at all in terms of where we're at. This report is about what our footprint is and how much we emit. And as a council, you get to decide whether you want to do anything about that. Do you want to keep driving diesel trucks around everywhere and a bit of stuff in there that your kids get grumpy about because you're having an impact on climate change that they believe in that you don't believe in? This is just about calculating what our footprint is, how much we emit, and it's up to everybody here and the community through the way they vote to decide what they want to do about that. Beg your pardon?
Can I issue a correction?
Please.
Councillor Percival said that Roger was responsible for the emissions, and just to clarify, Councillor Percival, you are responsible for the emissions along with your colleagues around the governance table. So it's your responsibility. We're just reporting on the emissions here.
Right of reply, and then Councillor
I'd
Hopkins.
say personally, I think we should stop all emissions.
Thank you. That's a very socially responsible approach. Councillor Hopkins.
I give you permission to have an emission, Councillor Percival. We just experienced a clash.
Sorry, that was that, or have you got something of value to add here?
A couple of questions. Quite briefly, noting that there's a reference in the report saying that no text can be changed if we want to keep the conclusions valid. I do note that the grammar of the correction at on the bottom of page 21 needs to be amended. It reads at the moment, singular, despite this, council singular has done some work over the last 5 years to actively reduce. I suggest that from there on it reads reduce its emissions and has work planned to reduce its emissions further. The work is detailed below. The other two questions I have that are related to detail, there's a reference on page 39 of the agenda and the report to the council having a forestry and agriculture business unit, and I don't think it does. And there's also a reference on page 45 to the transfer station being operated by Wasteco, and I think it's actually Waste Mins. But my big question is on page 33, if you look at the Toitu carbon mandatory boundary, and you go through the total direct emissions, the total indirect emissions, the gross emissions, the category 1 direct removals, am I right in assuming that as of now, we have negative total net emissions of either 77291 or 6515044? In other words, that's on page 32 or 33 of the agenda. If you look at the total net emissions are showing as minus 77291, and then there's additional emissions of 12147. So the actual total on the right-hand side is minus 65144, which means that we're negative total emissions, not positive. And if I am correct, isn't that a very good thing?
That's a great question. I think, Roger, did you have a comment on that specifically?
Yes, I can do, but with
No.
your experience, you're probably able to explain it better than anybody. It
Well,
relates to the
let's see how you go.
the forestry.
Yeah.
So there is commentary in the report that says whilst the forestry offsets it, we should still be considering our overall emissions. Whilst in the balance is favourable, as you point out, it's still appropriate to look at the emissions that are created from wastewater and our activity.
But that's precisely my point. We can hear, shoot and flagellate ourselves as much as we like, but because of our forestry holdings, we are actually in a positive position. And indeed, large swathes of farmland are being converted to forestry by all manner of international entities for precisely the same reason. So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. Let's celebrate the fact that we're in positive.
Well, so I think to a degree, Ken, I mean, what they're doing with the other forestry, obviously we don't get to capture any of the benefit of that because it's theirs. But yes, you're right. Through the good fortune or good management of us having the forestry asset, it means that our overall footprint is positive. However, to Roger's point, that shouldn't stop us from also wanting to reduce the amount of emissions that we create elsewhere as well. So there's great news in this report, but there's also some really interesting challenges should we wish to take those up. Tim, you sure? All right, one last from Roger.
Just briefly, in relation to the climate change impacts, which were listed on page 35, they were signed off by the council in June 2023.
Yes, but perhaps not unanimously. Thank you very much. Moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by not Councillor Percival, but Councillor Ryan. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. That's carried, and very generous of you, Councillor Percival, to help out with that. And if we now can please move on to the final agenda item that we've got here.
I don't think we actually moved and received.
Oh, shivers, we haven't.
Update.
Oh, do we have to do that? All right, we will move that, even though it was a general comment. Moved by Councillor Blackley, seconded by Councillor Ryan. We're moving that we accept the verbal update from Noik earlier in the day. So moved by Councillor Blackley, seconded by Councillor Ryan. All those in favour? Against? Thank you, that's carried. Welcome, Councillor Thompson. The risk report. Well, I think we'll give Joe the chance to talk to it while we've got the chambers here and we do have some time. So Joe, would you like to speak briefly to it? The risk management report. Oh, sorry, Joel or Victoria, whichever one of you.
Yeah, sure. Just a few notes in regards to risk and Waitaki District Council. We've gone some time now without a risk advisor, even though we have been very active in the space of recruitment. We've had a couple of very good people come forward who unfortunately, for different reasons, have dropped out of the recruitment process, which is very unfortunate. However, I want to acknowledge Victoria and her team and the phenomenal job they've done holding the risk profile together and continuing to do risk work across council. Just of note, there isn't any significant changes from the previous reporting for the risk profile, given that we don't have somebody who's able to really be working right across council with education processes and really supporting mitigation factors. So I just want to bring that to mind, that there aren't significant changes. Having said that, there are a couple of risks which have dropped in their risk profile, which is fantastic to see through great work from Victoria and her team.
Yeah, thank you. And look, I want to also acknowledge the wonderful work that you are doing under what is a significantly resource constrained environment with Amelia moving on, and also congratulate you on the reduction of the key risks, specifically around the serious staff harm risk that we spoke to a couple of pars ago, and I expressed some concern about, and it's great to see that the work that's been done around helping, whilst you can't reduce the likelihood of it happening, you can reduce the consequences of it, and I think that that's a great thing. And I'd also just like to reinforce your comment that while it's good to see here that we're getting good reporting and that we're comfortable that the risks that we've got here are being overseen properly, I do express concern at that lack of resource that we've got to be able to kind of dive deeper and as Amelia did, constantly educate people and keep them kind of in check with what they're doing. And I feel the biggest risk that we've got at the moment is we don't quite know what some of these things could be, and so I'm really supportive of us trying to recruit that resource. And we spoke last time about potentially reaching out to some of our neighbouring councils to see whether they had some resource that we might be able to utilise, and I would encourage that if needed. So thank you, and I'll open the floor up to any questions that there might be with regard to the report. No, we're good to go. Thank you. Could I ask for someone moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Ryan. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. That's carried. The final agenda item was to move to public excluded. We don't have any public excluded minutes, and so we don't need to do that. And so with that, I will call the meeting to a close. Thank you.
Very, very.
Hmm?
Very, very.
Very varied.